Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, the left-wing media continues to attack their own. They have zero self-reflection on anything going on. Plus, President Donald Trump has been in office 1 year. We'll have all that coming up. And a good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you by Melissa Gott and the team over at the Law Group here in Wilmington. You can reach out to them, 910-251-6088, or visit their website. It is lawgroupnc.com. We'll hear more from Melissa and her team coming up a little bit later on in the program this morning. Before we get into this topic today, which includes a hit piece by the New Yorker magazine against Bari Weiss, who you've probably heard a lot about over the last 6 months or so. She is the new head of CBS News. Today marks 1 year that President Donald Trump has been in office as the 47th president of the United States, and it ties into, as we go through some of the details in this article from the New Yorker, it ties into what has been a disastrous year for those on the political left. Trump had already been in office once. He served from 2016 to 2020. He was in the office for 4 years, got a lot accomplished, did a lot. They never figured out how to handle and cover him. You would have assumed after 4 years of dealing with this guy in the Oval Office, 4 years dealing with him as the president of the United States, they'd figure out what is the winning strategy against Trump. They have not. Here we reflect now 1 year since he began his second term as president of the United States, and it seems like absolutely nothing has changed. Absolutely nothing. And of course, we'll continue to track what goes on within this administration, continue to track the great work coming out of the Oval Office as we sit here 1 year later after the inauguration of Donald Trump. Before we get into this article over at the New Yorker, I want to just kind of set the groundwork on a couple of different things as it relates to media. Media is in a tough spot right now. All forms of media. Traditionally, more traditional forms are suffering the most. I saw a headline in the last couple of weeks up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which is one of the longest running newspapers in the entire nation, has announced that they're shuttering. I think that's happening in May. Over the last 6 months, I saw that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is a major publication, obviously down in Atlanta, Georgia, they are ending or have already ended their print circulation of their paper. So the newspaper industry is getting hit very hard. Obviously, you can see that around the state of North Carolina as well. There's really only one paper in circulation now. It's the News and Observer, whether it's Raleigh or Charlotte. The Wilmington Star News is a shell of what it used to be. Up in Asheville, their paper is almost non-existent now as well. So, that industry has, of course, taken it pretty squarely on the chin and has dealt with a lot of layoffs, a lot of reduction in circulation. It's a tough time to be in the newspaper industry, no question about that. Television, seeing similar things as well. Not quite to the extent of newspapers, but you're seeing it there. You've got audiences that are way down. You've got viewerships that are way down, and they're struggling. Coming up and later, and actually probably pretty soon here, Stephen Colbert is going to be stepping away from his show at CBS. And they're not replacing him. They are getting rid of The Late Show that they have had for, I don't even know, it's 60, 70 years now. The Late Show has existed on CBS. It's a money thing. The show costs a fortune to produce. Colbert himself's making $20 million a year, and he's got hundreds of people working on the show. It's no longer making business sense. And it won't be long before Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon are probably out the door too. Now, I don't agree with any of their politics, and they're not being fired or being laid off or whatever for a political reason. It's happening because the audience is no longer there. And this is the dirty little secret as it relates to media, specifically when we talk about radio and television. These are advertiser-supported programs, advertiser-supported stations. And the only way in which you can generate revenue as a over-the-air broadcast television or radio station is by selling ads. The only way you sell ads is if you have people watching or listening to your content. That is the nitty-gritty of radio and television. And for the advertisers, well, they've got many more options than they have had in years past. They can purchase ads on Facebook and Instagram and X. They can purchase ads on podcasts, Pandora, Spotify, all of the other platforms that people use to consume media, YouTube, TikTok. You can purchase as a small to medium, large business. You can purchase advertising on any of these platforms for a relatively marginal fee. Now, there's, of course, plenty of argument in the ad and marketing space as to what is the most effective, where is the best place to spend money. But there's a lot more marketplaces than were available even 20 or 30 years ago, where you really only had the option of buying some ads in the newspaper, buying ads on television and radio, and then, of course, your outdoors, buses, billboards, things of that nature. Now there's literally thousands of places that you can purchase advertising. So the media industry as a whole, more traditionally more legacy media, continues to suffer. The content, for the most part, especially out of the major television broadcast companies, we're talking CBS, ABC, and NBC, the content, for the most part, isn't really all that compelling. Now, they might have a couple of shows that are better than others. They might have a couple of programs that have larger audiences than others. But for the most part, specifically the news divisions of these entities, which include the Sunday morning shows, their nightly news programs, those have seen a rapid, and I mean rapid, decline in audience and in viewership. And I think that is in large part due to the fact that individuals can now find more compelling content elsewhere. If you are a even slight conservative-leaning person, you would be mad to watch these nightly news programs every night because they don't have any reflection on what it is actually like living in the United States of America right now. They do not provide opinions, information, news that is accurate to what you are dealing with day in and day out. They have made the decision that it is no longer the news biz. They have made the decision that the content really no longer matters. It's all about pushing a political ideology and pushing a political agenda. So part of the reason why you've seen some of these attacks on Bari Weiss, who is the new head, the editor-in-chief, the head honcho over at CBS News, is because she is shattering, in some part, the facade that has been created by these left-wing elites that are in these media circles. She is absolutely taking an axe to what they have created, and they're terrified about it. They don't like it at all. And so this article that ran over at the New Yorker this weekend is a profile from the New Yorker. It says the headline of it is Inside Bari Weiss's Hostile Takeover of CBS News. Now, that in itself is kind of a ridiculous headline. Bari Weiss was hired to run the news division at CBS. She was hired. Somebody came to her, and we'll get into the details in the story. But somebody came to her and said, "Would you like to operate the news division of CBS?" And presumably she said yes. They negotiated a contract, negotiated a salary. She's now in the position. I don't know how you could possibly phrase that as a hostile takeover. That would be like somebody inviting you to their house. You show up to their house, you ring their doorbell, you knock on their front door, you go inside, and then you're accused of hostilely entering and taking over somebody's home. No, you in fact were invited to go to their home. You were in fact invited to visit. In the case of Bari Weiss, she was invited with large sums of money to take over CBS. But because she is interested in news, because she is interested in fact, because she is interested in reality, oh no, That is a major, major problem for those in these highfalutin, liberal, elitist circles that exist in every single one of these major television news publications and outlets that exist. There is no diversity of thought. There is no diversity of opinion. That is not recognized by those on the political left running these news organizations. And they are absolutely terrified of Bari Weiss. So diving into this article over at the New Yorker, inside Bari Weiss's hostile takeover of CBS News, it reads, on Halloween, a production team from 60 Minutes, CBS's flagship news program, went to Mar-a-Lago for an interview that correspondent Norah O'Donnell was conducting with Donald Trump. It was the president's first appearance on the network since filing a lawsuit against it, claiming that in the run-up to the 2024 elections, 60 Minutes had unfairly edited an interview with his opponent Kamala Harris, which they in fact did. Most observers agreed that the suit had little merit. I don't think that's accurate framing from the New Yorker, but what do you expect? However, CBS's parent company, Paramount, which was owned by the Redstone family, had agreed to pay Trump $16 million to settle the matter. At the time, the media mogul David Ellison was in the process of acquiring Paramount, an $8 billion deal that required the administration's approval. Trump told O'Donnell at the time, I see good things happening in news. I think one of the best things to happen in this show is new ownership, CBS and new ownership. I think it's the greatest thing that's happened in a long time to a free and open, good press, is what the president told O'Donnell at the time. Bari Weiss, the now editor-in-chief of CBS News, was watching the interview off camera. Just a few years earlier, she had resigned from her position as an opinion writer and editor at the New York Times, condemning the paper as doctorally liberal and out of touch. Which is exactly the case, right? I mean, is anybody going to argue with me that the New York Times is liberal and out of touch? And it's not just the Times. It's the Washington Post, it's CBS, it's ABC, it's NBC, it's CNN, it's all of these other entities. They're all incredibly out of touch. And because they are so out of touch, they have lost their audiences. Because unlike in years past, where you only had the choice of 3 or 4 television stations, obviously going back before the invention of cable TV and satellite TV and streaming and all that stuff. Before, if a news outlet or news entity was out of touch, you really didn't have a way to find if that information was accurate or not. There was no sources to go and double check. I mean, you got the newspaper thrown on your front door at 4:30 in the morning. You could watch the news in the morning and at night. You could listen to some radio maybe, depending on where you lived and what news stations were available. But that was it. No internet, no smartphones, no Wikipedia, no social media, no alternative news outlets or platforms. Whatever they said was kind of gospel. It's kind of the truth. And there was no real way to push back against it unless you, of course, knew somebody with firsthand information that could argue against it. So Bari Weiss saying, and accurately so, that the New York Times is out of touch is 100% accurate. After the Times, she went on to start a Substack that would eventually become the Free Press. And as is described by the New Yorker, an anti-woke rejoinder to a mainstream media that Weiss argued pandered to an audience of elites who were, quote, turning against America. Now, the Free Press has had a couple of major stories over the last couple of years. One of them, and one that I covered extensively when I was doing morning radio in Wilmington back a couple of years ago, was the Yuri Berliner story. If that name sounds vaguely familiar to you, Yuri Berliner was I think, 25-year veteran of NPR. He worked in the business and economic department of NPR News in Washington, D.C., which is where their headquarters is. He self-describes himself in the article as a Subaru driving liberal. He doesn't shy away from his political ideology or agenda at all. He doesn't pretend that he's some middle-of-the-road guy. He makes it abundantly clear where he stands politically. He wrote an absolutely scathing op-ed on how NPR, National Public Radio, has gone wrong. How there is no diversity of thought, no diversity of opinion. And he highlights a couple of stories, including the Trump-Russia collusion story that NPR just completely botched. Highlighted how the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, of course, we now know completely true, completely verified, how NPR snubbed their nose at it. Said that they weren't going to engage in this kind of trash journalism. It's a totally real story. Could have been totally verified if they bothered to look into it, but it wasn't in NPR's best interest, as they're all card-carrying liberals. It wasn't in their best interest to dig into the story. That was one of the stories that the Free Press got out that got unbelievable amounts of media coverage because this was an inside man, not some crazy right-wing conservative. That's not who Yuri Berliner is or was. This is a guy who spent 25 years as a company man blowing up the facade that NPR had created. He published and ran that story over at the Free Press. Bari Weiss was able to secure the exclusivity on that. He was then suspended, then subsequently fired from his job at NPR for highlighting the disastrous situation that they have created. So she was doing really good work over at the Free Press. So back to her position now at CBS. Ellison had handpicked Weiss as the new head of CBS News in early October after buying the Free Press for $150 million. Many in the industry viewed the move as an attempt to further appease the president. That's odd. This whole article is about appeasing President Trump. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. According to a longtime media executive who told the New Yorker, we don't know the person's name, where position they are or anything, but a longtime media executive said, quote, "They just wanted to hire Bari as a symbolic gesture to Donald Trump to make sure that they got the deal through. Don't think about it as David Ellison paying $150 million for the Free Press. Think about it as $150 million on top of the price they paid for Paramount. It was basically the cost to get it to go through," referring to the merger that took place late last year. But Weiss's arrival at the network also coincided with a long-simmering crisis in broadcast news. In which its programming is increasingly disrupted by a rapidly dwindling audience. A rapidly dwindling audience. For Weiss, the job seemed to offer a chance to give viewers what she believed they really wanted: news coverage that was more heterodox and politically interesting, which I think is absolutely the case. I mean, we're talking about consumption. We're talking about media consumption. People, regardless of what your political background is, whether you're super tuned into politics or not really at all, you want to watch interesting content. And all of these major networks, CBS included, have turned into nothing more than propagandists. There's nothing interesting about coming on the air every single night with breaking news. Orange Man is bad. They've been doing this now for a decade, and there's nothing interesting, nothing compelling about that content at all. It's very, very boring. And I think it coincides very well with why so many individuals have decided to just turn it off and find somewhere else to get their news and information. And I mean, can you blame people for that? Can you blame them for turning it off? Can you blame them for saying, I'm done watching this garbage? I'm gonna go scroll around on Instagram for an hour. It's just not interesting. It's not unique. It was, I'll step back and say this. It may have been kind of interesting back during the first couple of years of Trump, like go back to 2015 during the campaign, 2016, early 2017, and maybe even through the midterm elections in 2018. Yeah, it was interesting for a while. Donald Trump completely shattered the political norms in America. As we were told for months and months on end, he has no shot of winning. He's a clown. He's not legitimate. There's no way he can win. Lo and behold, election night 2016, which we'll be dealing with the anniversary of that later this year. He wins. He clobbers the disgraceful, horrific candidate that is Hillary Rodham Clinton, absolutely blows her out, and the panic begins. The media coverage goes into overdrive, and we seemingly have been in that position now for a decade. And it's just boring. It's not compelling. It's not interesting in any way, shape, or form. It's the same old garbage every single night from these news outlets, every single night from these media entities. Audiences and viewers are turning away because it's not interesting content. So back to the article. The size of CBS News was daunting. The newsroom had 1,200 employees compared to around 60 at the Free Press, but its potential audience was also well beyond anything she, referring to Weiss, could have hoped to build with a Substack. Early on, she circulated a list of 10 principles that would guide the network's coverage under her leadership, laying out a brand of journalism that she said holds both American political parties to equal scrutiny. Oh my God. Oh my God. Bari Weiss, the new head chief over at CBS, wants to hold both political parties to equal scrutiny. That's just a bridge too far for those on the political left. That is just a bridge too far for those in the media apparatus across the country. She wanted to do that as well as embracing a wide spectrum of views and voices so that the audience could contend with what the best arguments were on all sides of a debate. Yeah, it's a non-starter for those people on the left. It's a complete non-starter. They're not interested. They don't want diversity. It's always ironic. I always make sure I highlight this. This is the DEI crowd, folks. This is the diversity, equity, and inclusion crowd. Yells and screams about this stuff 24/7. Yet you bring in a diverse opinion. You bring in a diverse thought that maybe pushes back against some of their preconceived notions, and they start having a panic attack. I mean, they completely lose their minds. They completely freak out and can't fathom how you could possibly have a different opinion from theirs. This is the diversity, equity, and inclusion crowd, I'll mind you. Bari Weiss, who is 41, had started the Free Press out of her home. Now she was ferried around in an SUV, and the company required her to be accompanied by bodyguards, including for a time inside CBS's office. That's something Weiss had described as annoying but necessary aspect of her new gig. At the same time, it was apparent to many inside the network that Weiss, a digital media native, was an uneasy fit in the more buttoned-up world of television news. That's the elitist speak. That's what I'm talking about. That's what these people think. News is we're the buttoned-up presentation of the world. We're the buttoned-up presentation of what is actually happening in real life. No, you're not. Take your blinders off. You guys don't represent a buttoned-up world. You guys don't represent, just because you put a nice suit on doesn't mean you're buttoned up and providing a buttoned-up opinion. Give me a break. In her first meeting, she donned a CBS News ball cap. That was at her first editorial meeting, and ended the session by telling the room, "Let's do the blanking news." At another meeting, Weiss urged staff to up their coverage of protests unfolding in Iran, mentioning videos she had seen online almost looked like a movie scene. One senior reporter with experience covering the country cautioned that some of what Weiss was seeing and citing were videos from protests 3 years earlier. Great. So, big major story, one of the largest revolutions in Iranian history. We covered it here on the Nick Craig Show, but for the reporters in CBS, that might be an old video. It might be a deep fake. Don't cover that. Weiss also seemed unconcerned about the norms surrounding talent recruitment, including reaching out to Fox News anchor Brett Baier, who was then still under contract at Fox News 4 days into the job. She arranged a joint interview with former Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice, which aired on CBS's streaming platform. Some applauded the move as evidence of Weiss's clout. Others thought it revealed her inexperience, with another longtime media executive telling The New Yorker, "Why are you booking these people for a show that 11 people are going to watch? That's not understanding where you should be prioritizing your time." The same day, this is great, the same day, Weiss sent a message to the entire CBS staff, news staff, which, as we just heard, is over 1,200 people. And the email read like this, quote, "By the end of the day Tuesday, I'd like a memo from each person across our news organizations. I want to understand how you spend your working hours and ideally what you've made or are making that you're the most proud of." And again, bridge too far. God forbid the new head of CBS News, God forbid the lady that's in charge, the one that's calling the shots, asks her employees, the 1,200 of them, a lot of people. It's a large business when you have 1,200 employees. And this isn't CBS as a whole. This is just the news division of CBS. What do you do? What are you doing all day? We're paying you to work. What's your day-to-day look like? What are you doing on company time? However, the New Yorker writes, many noted the similarities to an email that Tesla founder Elon Musk had sent to federal employees when he was leading the Department of Government Efficiency, requesting that they respond with a list of 5 things that they've accomplished this week. Weiss also asked the staff of 60 Minutes, the most watched news program in the United States, why the country thought its coverage was biased. Another person told me that Weiss had said that she was pursuing a de-blathification of CBS. I think that's a fair question as well. Regardless of whether it's the most watched, which, yes, it is, but its overall viewership is way, way down. Why does everybody think your coverage is biased? Why is it when people are asked what they think and what their opinions are on CBS News in 60 Minutes, why do they think that we're left-wing stooges? That's what I would call critical thinking. That's what I would call a little bit of self-reflection, which you've heard me say a million times now, is something that is missing greatly on the political left. There is very little, if any, ability whatsoever for many folks on the left to self-reflect on anything. It's why Trump derangement syndrome, or TDS as it's known, continues to exist in the way in which it does. Because there's no reflection. There's no ability to look into the mirror and just critically think on anything that you believe. And it is, I think, absolutely holding down the left right now. The New York article writes, Bari Weiss's embrace of a free press from an elite bias, what she might call woke politics, has taken her to the top of the media establishment. It has also aligned her with the tech billionaire class, more willing than ever to indulge Trump to protect the sanctity of stakeholder value. Her longtime friend told The New Yorker, Bari is incredibly moral. She is an incredibly value-driven person, but many of her past associates also emphasize her deep commitment to her own advancements, which is, by the way, a ridiculous slam. Andy Millis, a former colleague of Weiss's at the New York Times and the Free Press, told The New Yorker, even those of us who know her, who love her, and who saw how hard she was working, we underestimated the success that she was going to have. This is why The New Yorker is such a rag outlet. Her deep commitment to her own advancement. Why is that a bad thing? This is what's so screwed up with the left. Oh my gosh. Here is a woman who wants to be successful in the news business, and she's committed to it. And they use it as some sort of negative, or try and spin it into some sort of negative. Why? She is arguably the most powerful person in news right now, in terms of, behind the scenes, not an anchor or a host or somebody like that. She's arguably one of the most important people in the United States, the Western world worth of media. And how dare she be committed to her own advancement? Only the liberal left could possibly try and draw this into a negative thing. Oh, and by the way, this is also the left, the party of women, right? The party of women are strong. The party of we must do everything, women this, women that. Here you go. You've got a female leading CBS News, and all you've done since October when she's taken over the position is beat her up constantly. All you've done is take a baseball bat to everything that she's accomplished in her entire career. I'm not even a big Bari Weiss fan, if I'm being bluntly honest with you. I'm really not. I don't know all that much about her. I think the Free Press was and hopefully will continue to be a good outlet, but I'm no Bari Weiss lover. I don't agree with her on plenty of things. But oh, lo and behold, the Democrat Party, the party of women, has spent months now beating up on Bari Weiss, arguably the most powerful woman in media across the United States of America. These people are disgusting. These people are absolutely sickening. Party of women. Hey, you've got a female leading CBS News. Ugh. Yeah, but she wants free thought. Ugh. She wants people to be able to express diverse viewpoints. Therefore, she must be a radical, crazy right-winger. And for that, we should write hit pieces on her 24/7. It's just unfreaking believable with these people. Zero. You've heard me say this a lot recently. Absolutely zero consistency once again in any arguments that they make. Zero consistency whatsoever. Pick a freaking side, will you already? I can't determine whether you're on the side of women or not today. You got to choose, left wings. You got to choose, left wingers. Are you on the side of propping up women today or not? Because that's what you always claim. Here you are, once again, trying to destroy the credibility and crap all over Bari Weiss. Why? Because she's not towing your party line. Again, DEI crowd as well. We want diversity. We want inclusion, unless you're a conservative, unless you're a Republican, unless you have a thought that is a little bit different than mine. We'll continue with this nonsense over at the New Yorker, and this is just one of many articles that have been published by all of these left-wing hack outlets and organizations over the last couple of months. And I bring it up because I love media. I mean, at core, I just absolutely love media. I love radio. I love traditional outlets. I'm so honored to have this program on WBT Radio in Charlotte, one of the legendary news talk stations in the entire United States. I love media. I don't like the fact that newspapers are closing their doors. I don't like the fact that major news networks, whether we're talking cable or broadcast, are hacking and slashing employees. I don't like that radio companies are firing all of their local employees and centralizing their program. I don't like any of that. I don't like it. There is a way to bring these audiences back. There is a way to increase advertising, which increases revenue. There is a way to do it. I don't think, and this article, I think, very clearly makes the point, they're not interested in it. They want to be in their own little cocoon. They want to be in their own little enclave with everybody that feels and thinks and believes exactly the way that they do. And they view anybody that pushes back against that. They view that anybody that questions that as an existential crisis to their existence. Meanwhile, they are literally looking down the barrel right now of not existing in a couple of years anyway, due to the changing audience. So you can adapt and try and bring your audience back, or you can die a slow death like we've seen with the newspaper industry. Ladies and gentlemen, that is where television and radio is going without adapting. That is where these outlets go without strong leaders and people that understand what the future is. Embracing streaming, embracing podcasting, YouTube, and all of these other platforms. That's where this stuff is going. You don't have to believe me. You can think I'm full of crap. Go look at what happened and what is currently happening right now to the newspaper industry. That is exactly what is down the pike for TV and radio if they don't get their act together. I can absolutely promise you that that's the case. We'll continue with the New Yorker article coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to thank the law group here in Wilmington, as this program, up until, about 2 weeks ago, was on streaming platforms, all podcast apps and YouTube and Rumble X, all those platforms, just recently getting back on terrestrial radio. The only way that was possible was thanks to Melissa Gott and her amazing team over at the law group here in Wilmington. And I want to let you know that when legal challenges arise, sometimes good, sometimes bad, if so, trust the law group in Wilmington. For now more than 22 years, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across eastern North Carolina. I used Melissa Gott and her team back actually it'll be 6 years, hard to believe, coming up this summer, as I went through the process of navigating my real estate transaction and purchasing my home, and the law group had my back every step of the way. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues, if there are any, are resolved as quickly as possible. Great news, folks. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. Give them a call for any legal challenges you might be facing, 910-251-6088, or visit their website, lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. We'll continue with this article coming up after this as the Nick Craig Show rolls on a Tuesday morning, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Good Tuesday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show as we continue our coverage this morning of what can only really be described as a hit piece. Surprise, surprise, over at the New Yorker magazine. It is entitled Inside Bari Weiss's Hostile Takeover of CBS News. I'll remind you once again, Bari Weiss was hired. Her media company known as the Free Press was hired to run the news outlet. But as the New Yorker frames it, it is a hostile takeover of the organization. An entity that has failing viewership, failing audiences, just announced back a few months ago that it was canceling its late show, laying off Stephen Colbert, and not replacing him. Why do you think that might be the case? Well, Stephen Colbert is not an interesting character. His show sucks, frankly. And it's just too expensive. Again, as I mentioned at the open of the show, media, especially free available media like what is broadcast by CBS, the only way that works is if you have people willing to advertise, people willing to pay large sums of money so you can pay Stephen Colbert whatever it is, $20 million a year, and then fund his hundreds of people that work on his show. It only works if you can pay for it. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. I think that's an old Dave Ramsey line. Doesn't make dollars, doesn't make sense. And obviously, The Late Show is hemorrhaging cash for CBS, so they've decided to cancel it. And as I mentioned, I think some of the other networks, both ABC and NBC, won't be far behind it. So continuing with this article over at the New Yorker, continuing to trash Bari Weiss, it reads, a few days before Christmas, 60 Minutes was set to air a report on an El Salvadorian prison where the Trump administration had sent more than 200 deportees in March. The men, most of whom were from Venezuela, had been spirited out of the United States on a series of late-night flights in violation of a federal judge's court order. A 60 Minutes correspondent had interviewed two of them. The stories were harrowing. This is what the New Yorker writes. The stories were harrowing. One of the men told the reporter, there was blood everywhere, screams, people crying, people who couldn't take it, and they were urinating and vomiting on themselves. That's apparently from the story. She had reached out to the Trump administration for comment, but only received a cursory 2-sentence response. Like all of 60 Minutes stories, the segment had been fact-checked and vetted by the network's legal department. 5 separate screenings were held for various editorial stakeholders. Weiss was supposed to attend the final meeting on Thursday afternoon, but she had missed it. She didn't see the segment until that night, emailing suggestions for a few changes that she wanted incorporated into the piece. The network promoted the segment as the lead story for Sunday's episode for the show. The story was being finalized almost exactly as Ellison was pursuing another major expansion of his growing media empire. Earlier that month, he had launched a hostile takeover, once again, there's the word, hostile takeover bid to purchase Warner Brothers Discovery, the film and television conglomerate that had already announced a deal to be acquired by Netflix. In many ways, the outcome depended once again on Trump, since regulatory approval would be required for either sale to go through. So once again, somehow this is all President Donald Trump's fault. So Bari Weiss pulled the story. On Saturday morning, before the 60 Minutes piece was supposed to air, Weiss, who reports directly to Ellison, told 60 Minutes producers she was concerned that no officials for the Trump administration had been interviewed on camera for the piece. I mean, doesn't that make sense to you? As the New Yorker already lays out, 60 Minutes, the most watched news program in the United States of America. You are doing a lengthy segment on a Venezuelan prison. A prison in which people who have been in America illegally were deported to out of the United States of America. I would argue from a news perspective, not an opinion perspective, but a news perspective, which is what 60 Minutes is. Right? There is a clear difference, and you've heard me talk about this in the past. There is a difference between news and opinion. There is a reason this program is called The Nick Craig Show and not The Nick Craig News Show or The News with Nick Craig. It's not a news program. It's an opinion show. Yes, we cover news. Yes, I bring you relevant facts and information. But it's not I don't sit here and pretend to be some sort of buttoned up newsman. That's not what this program is. It's just not. 60 Minutes is in fact that button-up news program. That is how it promulgates itself. That is how it promotes itself. So you're going to run a hit piece, no surprise, on the Trump administration's efforts and successes of deporting illegal aliens to a Venezuelan prison. Don't you think it would be relevant to interview somebody in the administration? Reach out and get a quick interview with somebody? I'm not even saying the president himself. I mean, there's dozens of officials that they could have reached. Dozens of officials that they could have asked for comment on this. But 60 Minutes, in all of their unbelievable nature, they thought that that wasn't relevant. They thought that it didn't matter to get the feedback, to get the opinion, to get the comment from the Trump administration. So they chose not to. So what happened as a result? Bari Weiss pulled the story. She was of the mindset and of the opinion that this 60 Minutes news piece did not hit the bar of journalistic standards that she wanted at CBS News. And I mean, really, the buck stops with her. It's her newsroom. It's CBS News is her responsibility. She is the one that gives the final yes or no. She didn't think that the piece had enough of the other side, as I just read directly, and the New Yorker puts it in their article. Nobody from the Trump administration had been interviewed. She pushed people within CBS to do the interview, to reach out to the Trump administration, and on Sunday, 3 hours before the broadcast, the piece was officially pulled from the lineup, with her saying in a statement, "My job is to make sure that all stories we publish are the best they can be. Holding stories that aren't ready for whatever reason, that they lack sufficient context, or say they're missing critical voices happens every day in every newsroom." And surprise, surprise, the individual who put this piece together felt betrayed, saying that the government was killing the story. That once again, this was Donald Trump's fault for killing the story on 60 Minutes. These people are in such an unbelievable echo chamber. They can't even see through it. And this article goes on. I don't even know how many words this article is. I mean, it's got to be over 10,000 words. It goes on and on and on and on. And it's got Trump in the entire story. It's all his fault. The only reason any of this is happening is because Donald Trump is doing this. Donald Trump is doing that. No commentary about the liberal left-leaning bias that has put the media in this position. Like, they referenced it at one point, but it was a quote from Weiss, not from themselves. They're not interested in talking about it. They're not interested in delving into why Bari Weiss is at CBS. It's not because of David Ellison. It's not because of the free press. It's not because of Donald Trump. The reason that she was brought into CBS is the network is failing. Legacy media outlets like CBS are hemorrhaging cash. And if there is not a major change, they will cease to exist in their current form. CBS is never going to go away. They are one of the largest media entities in the entire world. You're not going to wake up tomorrow morning and read a headline that CBS is dissolved and is no more. It's not going away. But the programs that they produce, the amount of news coverage that they produce, that will, in fact, sooner rather than later, probably go away if they don't make a substantial change. If they don't claw back audiences, if they don't claw back viewers, they will cease to exist. Again, this is an advertiser-supported industry. This isn't public radio. This isn't public television with viewer-supported models. No, this is an advertiser-supported models. You got to have eyeballs on the TV screen, eyeballs on the streaming platform to generate revenue. And as I've said, it's no surprise that audiences are turning away. It's no surprise that individuals are sick of watching the same garbage and slop put in front of them every single night by these low-rank journalists, I'll put that in air quotes, over at CBS and at ABC and at NBC. It's not compelling. It's not interesting. It's been the same trick and pony show for a decade. And the audiences have said, we're just going to go elsewhere. I'm going to go play on my phone for an hour instead of watching this trash on television. That is why Bari Weiss is at CBS News. That is why she is the helm of the news division at CBS. It's got nothing to do with Trump. It's got nothing to do with Ellison. It's their own failure. Once again, how many times have you heard me say this? Seriously. How many times have you heard me say this? The left has once again put themselves in a completely unwinnable situation. They have clearly determined that their only path forward is to go negative on anything Trump, anything conservative, anything Republican. They've been doing this now for quite more since Trump, but this change started 20 or 30 years ago. It's been a slow progression, and I think Donald Trump finally was the kerosene or the gasoline that caused the fire to explode. It was already burning. It was festering. Trump was the can of gasoline thrown onto the fire. Since then, they have been completely out of control. They have completely lost their minds. And it all comes back to the lack of inward reflection. I want to get to some comments coming in here on our live chats this morning. Comment coming in referring to Weiss saying she's not the best, a Larry Ellison bot, but she's savvy and better than anything MSN mainstream media has got. And that's my point. And I mentioned that. I'm not some big Bari Weiss fan. I'm just not. I don't, if I'm being honest, and maybe I should know a little bit more about her, I don't really know all that much about her. The part of the article, part of this article over at the New Yorker I skipped over, talked about her background and her home life. I read through that. It didn't really make for compelling radio here this morning, so I didn't bother going through it. So I've read about her. I know a little bit about her. I haven't read her books. I know she's got a couple of those out. I probably should get on that. So, but to me, this is less about Bari Weiss and more about the lack of self-reflection within the media landscape. Another comment coming in, Leslie comments, says, though mainstream media viewership is down, they've done their job in brainwashing a huge population that Orange Man is bad. You can spot a CNN viewer from a mile away. You absolutely can. There is no question about that at all. Nice comment coming in as well. It says, Nick, you are our truth in North Carolina. Thank you very much, B.I. Carlton. Appreciate that comment as well. And, you know, it's got to be tough. I get it. This is a rapidly evolving ecosystem. This is a rapidly changing landscape. In years past, and this is a little bit more inside baseball, if you went back like 40 years, 50 years, if you owned a local television or local radio station, you, for all intents and purposes, had the ability to print money. It was an unbelievable opportunity. You could essentially print money. You could make as much money as you wanted. And that's partially because licenses are doled out by the federal government. The FCC regulates what goes on broadcast television and radio. They don't obviously mandate what goes on podcasts. They don't have any control over cable news. That's why you can use profanity and to some extent, in some level, that stuff is allowed on cable news. That stuff is allowed on YouTube and on Rumble and these other platforms. So you used to be able to just do whatever the hell you wanted if you owned a television, a station, or radio station, which many of these stations were owned by smaller companies or mom and pop outlets back 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. You had the ability to do that, but that's all changed. Now it's major conglomerates that own all of these radio and TV stations. There are very few, if any, mom and pop operations left. And if they are, they're typically in smaller towns in North Carolina. You drive out west here from Wilmington, you go through Whiteville and Lumberton and some of those areas. There are local, community-owned, family-run and operated radio stations. But in all of your major areas, I mean, even here in Wilmington, you've got these large media entities like Cumulus, my previous employer, that own these stations. They're not really interested in what's going on. It's why I haven't been replaced on the radio here locally. They're just not interested in it. They don't think the juice ain't worth the squeeze. They don't believe that it's relevant to have a morning talk show on in this market, as, by the way, the only talk radio station in Wilmington. They just don't, there's no interest in it. It hasn't been replaced. And I don't think it probably ever will be. I don't know if they're currently hiring for the position, but probably not would be my guess. I haven't looked at it to see if that's the case, but probably not. What was in years past the ability to print money has dramatically shifted. That is because of YouTube. That is because of TikTok. That is because of Instagram and Rumble and X and all of these other platforms that give people an alternative. Many of you are choosing, well, every single one of you actually, you are choosing to listen to this program this morning or today if you're listening to it after the fact. You didn't turn on a radio and find this show. You had to go out of your way, make the effort to tune in, whether you're watching it live on our platforms or listening in your podcast app. You made that choice. You have that choice now as a media consumer. You didn't have that choice 40 years ago, but you do now. And so you're watching the tower of cards begin to collapse on these major media entities, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to react to it. They just seemingly are continuing to dig themselves a bigger and bigger hole, and eventually that hole is going to be filled. It's going to be poured over with cement, and there ain't going to be anything left. I have sympathy with it. I don't want traditional media to go away. The reach, the power, the influence that they have is incredible. But if they don't smarten up, if they don't get their act together, if they don't pull their head out of their ass, they will. You're already seeing it. Colbert is done. CBS is getting rid of its major evening comedy program. It's gone. That doesn't happen by accident. That was not a short-sighted, or I'm even sure an easy decision for CBS to make. But they made it, and they had to. So we'll keep an eye on what goes on with Bari Weiss over at CBS News, and we'll continue to cover it. If any more of these interesting hit pieces come out, I'll try and bring them to you. Of course, as time pertains and is allowed and it is relevant right here on the Nick Craig Show. That's going to do it for a Tuesday edition. Thanks to the law group here in Wilmington for their continued support. Reach out to Melissa Gott and her team for any legal challenges, lawgroupnc.com. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Is available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and now can be heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Thanks for joining us. We'll do it again tomorrow morning right here on the Nick Craig Show.